My name is Leslie French. I was born in 1923 at a house in Lexden. I went initially to, when I was 5 years old, to a school there, but at the age of 8 we moved to Parsons Heath, because that was much nearer to where my father worked for him to travel on his bicycle. I left school in 1937, age 14. The thing in those days for us lads was to get an apprenticeship in one of the trades, and it so happened in my case I got an apprenticeship in the printing trade, and that was where I was for the next few years. Unexpectedly, the war came along, and in due course I was to join the Royal Air Force. I came from a working class family, and the thought I would ever get near enough to an aeroplane to touch it was pie in the sky, if you'll accept the thing. But then, of course, the war came along, and for my generation, our lives were turned completely on their heads. And I found myself in due course, as a consequence of, after the Battle of Britain, there was an organisation created called the Air Training Corps, and I was one of the first members of the Colchester 308 Squadron of the ATC. And it was as a consequence of my training in the ATC, and certainly experiences which included my first flight at Watersham Airfield in a Blenheim 1. The excitement of that gave me the initiation to volunteer at a local RAF office in Colchester, and as a consequence I had to go up to London for an interview there, and at that interview I was provisionally accepted for aircrew training. So back home again now, and I had to wait until my 18th birthday, which duly came along, and I found myself in June of 1942 being called up, and I had to report to Lord's Cricket Ground of all places for my initiation. I was to be there for some 3 weeks, I suppose, maybe a little bit less, which involved, first of all, medical tests, physical tests. Having been accepted through them, we then had to be equipped with our uniforms and all the equipment, including a thing called a housewife. No, not a pretty face and a nice body. This one you unrolled, and in there were all the needles and cottons. In future, when a button wants sewing on, your mum wasn't there to do it. You had to do that for yourself. Quite a lot of things were about to change. Finally, of course, we had inoculations, vaccinations, and once that was over, initiation was complete. Within about 6 weeks from then, I found myself on the way to Scarborough, where I was to do a 12-week course on the basic ground subjects relative to flying and everything that's included, of which, of course, how it is that an aircraft heavier than air can be made to fly, to do with the weather and things of that nature, armaments. 12 subjects in total, Some were by giving talks, some were films. Also, of course, the inevitable 6 o'clock in the morning, get up, and by 6:30 you had to be outside, and it was a question of drill. And it wasn't too bad, but it took a bit of getting used to. But I like to think at the end of 11 weeks, we were doing the RAF quite proud. I think the squad I was in, which must have been some 30 or 40 lads, were quite good. Anyway, the last week was the 12th week, and in the first 4 days of that week, no drill or anything of that nature. We sat down 4 subjects per day for 3 days, and it really was damned hard going. But at the end of I said 3 days, I beg your pardon, it was 3 subjects per 4 days, over 4 days. But at the end of 4 days, believe me, you were knocked out. It was tough going, no question about that. We were never ever told the results of those examinations, but we do know that they were in due course used in the decision as to whether we were to finish up as a pilot training, a navigator training, or wireless operator air gunner. But that was for the future. So at the end of that 12th week, we found ourselves getting on a train, and this train was to take us to Carlisle. Now, Carlisle, we used to, we were in Nissen huts there, with the tiniest little coke stove I've ever seen, and it was bloody cold, because this was January. Anyway, each morning, we were taken over the border into Scotland, and there to an airfield where there were a number of Tiger Moths and a couple of 3 Nissen huts with the necessary clothing for us to put on to protect us, because the Tiger Moth, of course, is an open cockpit. Now, each and every one of us was to do 12 one-hour flights, and the instructor that we each had a twofold purpose. Obviously, he was there to try and teach us to fly these things, but rather more important, really, he was what they were watching each and every one of us, and they were making a decision as to who they thought amongst us were most likely to successfully go through in the future a 24-week flying training and come out at the other end as a successful pilot. And it was after 8 hours that I was given the opportunity to go solo for the first time, which was encouraging. The solo as such wasn't all that exciting, in as much as I was barely allowed to take off, do 2 circuits of the airfield and come in and land. But at least I was the only one sitting in an aircraft at the time, and it was encouraging. And so, excuse me, at the end of about 8 weeks, I suppose, each and every one of us had done our 12 one-hour flights, and during that period, I think about 15 of us had been allowed to go solo. And we now found ourselves being transported to Heaton Park at Manchester, and Heaton Park was a collection area for people who had just gone through the experiences of ourselves, and that was where the final decision was made who would now enter the Empire Air Training Scheme, which meant you would do your training in Canada, the USA, South Africa, or Rhodesia. This photograph was taken, it's a professional one, that I had taken for the benefit of my mother, and it is me in the uniform of the ATC 308 Squadron, Colchester. Right, having found myself transported in South Africa to the Transvaal, and we arrived at a place called Colchester, and on the outside of the area there was quite a large airfield which had a number of aircraft, but it wasn't officially anything other than just a large airfield. But under the Empire Air Training Scheme, suddenly the money appears and buildings were put up, and it was created into a really first-class Air Force airfield. There were about 30 RAF lads, about 20 South African white lads, and we were on a course that was to be 12 weeks, and that was in the Tiger Moths. And during that period, we would obviously the initial training is for takeoff and safe landing. Having got beyond that, we would do a few short cross countries, etc. And after about 6 weeks, we would have a test with the senior examiner there. And following the next 6 weeks to complete the course in the Tiger Moths, we started getting involved in aerobatics and also putting the thing into a spin and learning how, if your aircraft gets into a spin, what you should do to get it out. And when you had to do it both to port and to starboard, but once you had successfully done that and you entered it in your logbook, it had to be written in red because it comes under the heading of a dangerous operation. We also got involved in formation flying, and therefore at the end of 12 weeks, or 11 weeks actually I suppose, each and every one of us was given a final test flight by the senior examiner there, and this decided whether we were passed and to move on to do a further 12 weeks on the I'll get it in a minute. I'm sorry, you can cut this, can't you?
Yeah, I can cut it, and then when you restart,
I can go back now.
No problem.
Yeah. So, having had this final test at EFTS, which was elementary flying training, we now move on to advanced flying training, and I found myself transported to an airfield at Reneken, which was not too far away and not too far south of Johannesburg. And so now I was to start 12 weeks of training on the American-built Harried. The chief differences about the Harried as opposed to the Tiger Moth: first of all, you did get a cover over the top of your head. Secondly, it had retractable undercarriage, and also you would now came with flaps, which certainly didn't appear on the Tiger Moth. And so it was quite a big difference. It had a large what to us seemed a large radial engine at the time. And so it was a much advanced aircraft. And so now we were faced with 12 weeks training there. Basically, the Reneken airfield was a single runway. So the very first trip, I get in the front seat, which is where the trainee always sits, The instructor sits in the seat behind. The instructor takes the thing off. The first thing he does is to take us over to a nearby auxiliary airfield to point out to us if at any time there is trouble on the main runway, so we were not in a position to land there, then this was where we had to take the aircraft, land it there until the runway at the radial was clear for everybody else to land there. So that was the very first thing. Take off again, and it was about, I should think, about an hour-long training session. And basically what we were doing was getting used to the controls and the differences, and remembering that after we take off, you've got to raise your undercarriage. But also, before you take off, you've got to put the flaps down, which gets you extra lift. Having got into the air and having taken the undercarriage up, you've also got to take the flaps up as well. And you also have to remember when you come back home that the wheels aren't down there until you put them there. So you have to remember that there is a retractable undercarriage which has got to be put down, and also you need the extra lift from the flaps. So you must also remember to put the flaps down. And so we start going through the initial exercises, which was very similar in some respects to what we did in the Tiger Moths, except we were now doing it in a much more powerful aircraft. After 6 weeks, we had a test by the senior instructor, and a further 6 weeks where you got into the more dangerous areas of flying, which again included the putting the aircraft into a spin and getting it out again. We did rather more
no problem.
no, when you get 12 aircraft together.
Formation,
yeah. Yes, we now got very much into the formation flying, and quite a lot of the flying. Also, of course, now we got, yes, I almost forgot this, and it was important, believe me, night flying. And this was the first time we'd really got into night flying. And that itself came under, you had to record that in red, that came under the dangerous side of things. And we would do, first of all, short three-legged cross countries, but as time went by, those legs got longer and longer. And I can remember one occasion, I haven't got a great feeling about the Lord looking after me, but I must admit there was an occasion that maybe I'm wrong and he did. Because on the way back on the third leg, and I suppose I got a bit lazy, because ahead of me, I spotted what I thought to be was the aircraft in front of me. So instead of my normal navigating, I just followed him. It wasn't until I suddenly realised I should have got to the airfield about 5 or 10 minutes ago, and I hadn't. And I realised that what I had been following was not another aircraft. I had to turn round, and fortunately it wasn't too windy that day, so it was a matter of 180-degree turn back, and I didn't have to worry too much about wind drift. And in due course, thank God, the airfield turned up. I suppose you could call it overconfidence and a wee bit lazy. And therefore, that's the only explanation I can give. In reflection on why I did it, I can't give you a logical answer. It's just one of those silly things that happen to people, and it happened to me. And so as I say, fortunately, I was able to put things right. But there was that last 10 feet or so before the landing, which quite frankly was automatic. Having got, I mean, I made for me, was a normal landing approach. Everything was absolutely normal. And of course it was along a flare path this was night flying, until I got down to roughly, I've got to say 10 feet, I can't exactly know exactly what it was, but it was round about 10 feet. For some reason or other, which I have no explanation for, but it happens to people in life, I suddenly went blank. And the next thing I remember is that aircraft was touching down on land. But I can't honestly say that it was a normal landing, because that 10 feet, I have no recollection of what I was doing. And so therefore, if there is a Lord that looks after us, on that occasion he must have been looking after me. And the big surprise is, despite all this, when I actually got out of the aircraft, my instructor had been watching, congratulated me on a perfect landing. How silly can things be? Okay.